Arachnophobia. This is one of the most common phobias in the world, and for many people it starts in childhood without any single triggering event. The fear is of spiders, and while that might sound straightforward, the reaction it produces in people who genuinely have it goes far beyond simple discomfort. A person with arachnophobia can feel their heart rate spike, their body freeze, or an overwhelming urge to leave a room the moment they spot even a small spider on the other side of a window. Researchers believe part of the reason spiders trigger such a deep response is evolutionary. For most of human history, the ability to quickly detect and avoid potentially venomous creatures was genuinely useful for survival. The brain learned to treat spiders as a category worth fearing. And for some people, that response never got switched off, even in environments where spiders pose no real threat. What makes arachnophobia particularly interesting is how culturally variable it is. In parts of the world where spiders are commonly eaten or kept as pets, rates of this phobia are significantly lower, which suggests that while there may be a biological foundation, the environment we grow up in shapes how strongly that fear takes hold. Treatment is very effective. Gradual exposure therapy, where a person slowly and safely increases their contact with spiders over time, has one of the highest success rates of any phobia treatment. Acrophobia. The fear of heights affects a surprisingly large portion of the population, and it is one of those phobias where the physical symptoms can be almost as disorienting as the fear itself. Standing at the edge of a balcony, a tall bridge, or even partway up a ladder can produce dizziness. Shaking legs, a tight chest, and a powerful pull to back away immediately. What separates acrophobia from a normal cautious response to height is the degree of the reaction and how far it extends into everyday life. Some people with severe acrophobia avoid upper floors of buildings entirely or feel distress simply looking at photographs taken from high places. The underlying mechanism involves the brain's threat detection system misfiring. Heights are genuinely dangerous, and a degree of caution around them is rational. But in acrophobia, the brain escalates the threat response to a level that far exceeds any actual danger in the situation. There is also a strange phenomenon associated with this phobia, sometimes called the high place phenomenon, where a person standing at a height feels an inexplicable urge to jump, not out of any desire to do so, but seemingly as an intrusive thought generated by the brain's attempt to process the danger it perceives. This experience frightens many people into thinking something is wrong with them, but it is actually a well-documented and relatively common response to height anxiety. Claustrophobia. Few experiences trigger panic as reliably in affected people as being in a small, enclosed, or tightly confined space. Claustrophobia is the fear of enclosure, and it can be activated by elevators, MRI machines, crowded rooms, tunnels, or even wearing a tight piece of clothing around the neck. The reaction tends to combine two distinct fears that often travel together in this phobia: the fear of restriction and the fear of suffocation. A person with claustrophobia in an elevator is not just uncomfortable with the small space. Their brain is generating a genuine alarm signal that communicates danger, and the body responds accordingly with a racing heart, shallow breathing, sweating, and an urgent need to escape. The phobia has real practical consequences for people's lives. Medical procedures that require lying still in an enclosed scanner are among the most commonly reported triggers for claustrophobic panic attacks, and many hospitals now offer sedation or open-sided machines specifically because of how widespread the condition is. Interestingly, claustrophobia does not always develop from a single traumatic experience of being trapped, though that is one pathway. Some people develop it gradually. Others seem to have had a low-level version of it their entire lives without any clear cause. Trypophobia. This one was not officially classified as a phobia in clinical literature until relatively recently, but the response it produces in a large number of people is undeniably real and often intense. Trypophobia is a strong aversion or fear response to clusters of small holes or irregular patterns, things like honeycomb, certain seed pods, coral, or sponges. The reaction tends to be described as a skin-crawling, deeply unsettling feeling of disgust and discomfort, rather than outright terror, which is part of why it sits in a slightly different category from classic fear-based phobias. Researchers have proposed that the response may be linked to an instinctive association between clustered hole patterns and certain venomous animals like the blue-ringed octopus or the skin patterns of some dangerous snakes. The visual features of these patterns, high contrast, irregular repetition, overlap significantly with features found in several genuinely dangerous things in nature. What makes trypophobia culturally fascinating is how rapidly awareness of it spread through the internet. Before the word existed and images circulated online, many people had the reaction but no framework to describe it. Once the term appeared, millions of people immediately recognized their own experience in it, which raises interesting questions about how much of a phobia's spread and recognition is shaped by the information environment people live in. Social phobia. More formally known as social anxiety disorder, this phobia goes significantly deeper than shyness or introversion, and the distinction matters. Someone who is shy might feel mild discomfort at a party, but manage fine. Someone with social phobia can experience genuine terror at the prospect of eating in front of others, speaking in a meeting, making a phone call while someone can hear them, or simply being observed doing an ordinary task. The core fear is of being judged, humiliated, or negatively evaluated by other people, and the brain treats that possibility as a serious threat. Social phobia is one of the most common mental health conditions globally, and also one of the most underdiagnosed, partly because people who have it tend to be quiet about it, and partly because a culture that values confidence can make sufferers feel that their fear is a personal failing rather than a recognized condition. The physical symptoms mirror those of other phobias: racing heart, flushing, trembling, difficulty speaking. But in social phobia, these symptoms create a second layer of anxiety because the person becomes afraid that others will notice and judge them for showing those symptoms. That loop of fear feeding fear is what makes social phobia particularly exhausting to live with day to day. Thanatophobia. This is the fear of death. And while it might seem like a fear everyone shares to some degree, thanatophobia refers to a level of preoccupation and dread that goes beyond normal mortality awareness and begins to interfere with daily life. A person with thanatophobia may find themselves unable to stop thinking about death, their own or that of people they love, and the thoughts carry with them a level of panic and physical distress that feels unmanageable. The phobia is closely linked to existential anxiety and often intensifies at transitional points in life. A serious illness, the death of someone close, or simply reaching an age where mortality feels less abstract. What makes thanatophobia complex is that, unlike most phobias, the thing being feared is not irrational in the way that fearing a harmless spider might be considered irrational. Death is real and inevitable, which means the usual reassurance that nothing bad will happen does not work in the same way. Treatment tends to focus less on exposure and more on building psychological frameworks for accepting uncertainty, finding meaning, and reducing the degree to which death-related thoughts dominate a person's present experience. Many philosophical and religious traditions have historically functioned partly as answers to exactly this fear. Emetophobia, the fear of vomiting, is one of those phobias that people rarely talk about publicly, partly because of embarrassment around the subject, but it is far more common than most people realize and can be genuinely life-limiting in its severe form. Emetophobia can involve fear of vomiting oneself, fear of seeing or hearing others vomit, or both. People with this phobia often develop elaborate avoidance behaviors to manage it, avoiding certain foods, avoiding alcohol entirely, refusing to be near anyone who mentions feeling unwell, scanning restaurants for exits, or avoiding travel and social events where nausea might be triggered. In severe cases, it can contribute to restricted eating patterns that resemble other eating-related conditions because the person avoids anything they associate with the possibility of feeling sick. The phobia often starts in childhood after a distressing vomiting episode and then builds gradually through the avoidance behaviors that feel protective in the short term, but reinforce the fear over time. One of the reasons it is particularly stubborn to treat is that successful avoidance feels rewarding. If you never let yourself feel nauseous, your brain keeps confirming that the avoidance is working, which makes facing the fear directly feel even harder. Nyctophobia, the fear of the dark, is one of the earliest phobias to appear in human development. And while most children grow out of the discomfort they feel at night, for some people it persists into adulthood in a form that is more than just a preference for well-lit spaces. Nyctophobia produces real anxiety in darkness or low-light conditions, a racing mind, heightened alertness, inability to relax, and sometimes full panic responses. The fear is rarely about the dark itself in a purely literal sense. It is almost always about what the dark conceals and the loss of perceptual control that comes with it. In daylight, the brain constantly processes visual information that confirms the environment is safe. In darkness, that information disappears. And for a brain already prone to threat detection, the absence of safety signals can feel identical to the presence of danger signals. There is a deep evolutionary logic to this. Humans are not well adapted to darkness compared to many predators, and nighttime historically was genuinely more dangerous. For most people in safe modern environments, the brain adjusts and accepts the dark as non-threatening. In nyctophobia, that adjustment either never fully happened or broke down at some point, leaving a nervous system that treats every dark room as an unresolved threat worth staying alert for.